Welcome to Enterprise Design's Industry Insights, where we identify key topics in the commercial real estate industry. I'm Ann Weston, Director of Design Services.
And I'm Jessica Green, Director of Client Services. For this series, we're discussing market trends with Dallas-based commercial real estate professionals.
Well then, while we're talking about multifamily, Patrick, I want to ask you a question. What are your thoughts on the trend for traditional office buildings converting to more of a hybrid traditional office and potentially even multifamily, or a complete conversion to just a different use? What are you seeing?
It's an interesting question. It's one that gets a lot of press as a proposed solution to, one, obsolete office buildings that are going through structural differences, as well as solving the problem of not having enough affordable housing. I think it's a tool that can be used to bring more product online, but I think people would be surprised as to the amount of office buildings that lend well financially for such a conversion. I read a study recently that 30% of all office buildings are good candidates from a financial perspective for a true conversion to multifamily. So I definitely think that's a tool that can be used that can bring more affordable housing to a market and take care of some obsolescence on the office front. But I don't think it solves the whole problem in entirety on its own.
Right. Have you seen success stories of, the hybrid model where, you can have corporate office tenants coming in as well as multifamily tenants coming in? I think one of the things that we've been talking with some of our clients about is, people who are going into the office just aren't used to having, these tenants that are there, that live there, coming into the same lobby as them, walking their dog, maybe being in their pajamas. There's just kind of that different thought process that, maybe corporate office is completely evolving where that's okay. But if there is, the ability to have, separate entrances, have you seen some of those success stories? It's
an interesting question. I think that will happen in New York City before it happens in Dallas. Locally, I can think of one that, the Santander Tower downtown, who's experimented with hotels and combining those with office. I think they have a couple floors that they've turned into hotels and mixed with office tenants. I think there's ways to do it, but it does take some thought, whether it's separate entries, separate elevators that are used for office versus the hotel or multifamily, so that you don't have too much interaction between office users and residents. But it does take careful planning.
I don't know. I think probably people are in businesses are more open to mixing the two uses today than they were, say, 15 or 20 years ago. I think part of that comes from, the dress code is less in the office today versus 20 years ago. I think the pandemic too, work from home, I think that caused people to maybe get a little more comfortable with the concept of, okay, now we're going to mix office with residential. Thanksgiving Tower or Santander Tower is the only situation here in town that I know of where they've tried to mix uses. I'd be curious to hear from you if you've got clients, because you may hear about it more than we do, because we're kind of one space removed from the actual tenants, or sometimes two or three. If your clients are saying, no, we're going to stay away from that, or how do you think they'd react?
I think a lot of them are considering it, especially if they do have quite a bit of vacancy on the office side. They're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? What's next? What's innovative? How can we actually move this off the market? So we're seeing a lot of clients actually consider it. And there's actually a building in Dallas that did the conversion to hotel and has been converted for quite a while. It's One Main Place right next to the Plaza, Bank of America Plaza. And they've been, part hotel, part office for quite a while. And, I think maybe there are some things that are kind of lessons learned on that, having kind of the communal lobby of both the residents and your office tenants. And, I think just kind of walking those areas and just really seeing, which, during the day, it's probably less of an issue. But I think when you get into like the nightlife, then you see a lot more things that, you maybe wouldn't necessarily see in an office building. We have clients that, have either been property managers there or, are currently property managers. And, it's just very interesting to hear the stories that they have because, it's just not what the office building used to be. But like you said, it may be something that is, more normal now because people are looking for something that isn't the traditional office building. The office building of the 80s, is probably no longer valid. If it doesn't have, the retail and the food and beverage and, the things that, you can have at a click of a button and your Amazon package is delivered, and it's got a box where it goes and you can send it back if you need to. So, I do think that conversion will hopefully see a lot more success stories and hopefully, just keep a beat on, the areas that are looking at that now to further help our clients, because there are quite a few clients that are looking at not only the conversion to multifamily, but maybe a hybrid of all three, hotel, residences, and office. So, making sure that we're being innovative and doing it the right way is really how we want to help facilitate with our clients.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're in an office, a lobby of an office building, and somebody comes out the elevator and it's a guy wearing a hoodie, sweatpants, and he has a dog. Today, I don't know if he's come from his apartment or if he's come from his office, to be quite honest.
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying. I think it's more acceptable today. Does that say, where are we on the curve in terms of acceptability? It's obviously more acceptable. Is it acceptable enough that you can create a mixed-use environment that includes residential and office? That's the question. I think we're probably there because of a couple things that I already mentioned. Plus, I think the abundance of office space, the overhang that we have, that's as Patrick said, is maybe as many as a third, which in this country is over 300 million square feet, and most of it is older buildings that, if you look at it and say, what are we going to do with these buildings, okay? We can tear them down and build something, in its place, which is probably the most efficient in terms of from a use, but it's not very environmentally friendly, okay? Tearing a building down. We can try to continue to use it as an office building, which is not a great solution financially, or we can try to adapt its use. And some office, I think that's a real challenge to the industry is how do we adapt these office buildings to some other use? Obviously there's a huge demand for residential. That would be great if we could convert all of them to residential. We'd solve the country's housing problem. But it's an expensive alternative because when you think about what's the real benefit you get when you take an office building and take an existing structure? Well, you're saving on land, you're saving on a steel structure, you're saving on a roof. Hopefully you're saving the elevators and the mechanical system, or you're refurbing them, and that's cheaper. But after those items, the rest of it, you got to build all brand new, which means drywall, doors, kitchens, bathrooms, all that stuff. And I'll bet that's probably 60 or 70% of the cost of a residence. So really you're rebuilding 70% of the residential, but you're also accepting the limitations of an existing structure. And so you have to buy that building really cheap to make all those numbers work.
Yeah, it really is like the plumbing and, the HVAC that are those really big ticket items because, the infrastructure just isn't there. And, if you need to, make things larger capacity, there may not be that ability, or you may be limited on, making the capacity to, the extent where it needs to be for, this new use. So that really is one of those areas that we're working with clients on, what is that actually going to cost when you have so much more plumbing and you need so much more HVAC for all of these individual units, and how to actually make that work. And we've got really great engineering partners that help us with that.
Yeah, and the other thing is just how the floor plate works. I think that's probably in one I forget, it was another design firm has developed some kind of algorithm. I think that was about 30% or 35% is kind of what the floor plate is. Because when you think about an efficient office building, that depth from hallway to glass line is going to be what, 40, 45 feet? Okay, so that means that if you try to do an apartment on that, now all of a sudden you're to 800 square foot apartment, you have 20 feet of glass by the 40 or 45 feet.
Yeah, it's very narrow.
For a multifamily unit, yeah, it gets to be very narrow. And when you have zoning codes that say, well, we need to have a window for every bedroom, and you want a window for the like the living area, now all of a sudden, you run out of window line pretty quickly. So office buildings that say have a 30, like a 30-foot depth or a 35-foot depth, those probably are going to work real well. There's not a lot of those around, especially when we spent the 80s building these efficient, office floor plates that were 22,000 feet. It's can we get some of the zoning codes changed? Can we come up with some unique designs? And will the marketplace, will renters accept those designs? I think those are all pretty big questions that, we're going to find out the answers in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where it goes. So are there design-related aspects that make a building more desirable to an owner? I know like renovated lobbies, but is there, outside of that, maybe something you've seen that an owner really desires, like from out of state or here locally?
I'd say a couple of things. Dixon and I talk a lot about a handful of amenities that your building really needs to have in an environment where it's flight to quality. Tenants want highly amenitized product. That includes fitness center, food use, tenant lounges, outdoor amenities. All of those are very important. Even to make a tour. A lot of prospects in the market won't even look at your building if you don't have some combination of all those amenities. I'd say that one other item on that vein would be spec suites. Given where construction costs are and how long that process has taken, one of the post-pandemic trends that we've seen really accelerate is the tenant or is the success of spec suites, and we've had the opportunity in several of our markets to test out that concept, and have seen a lot of leasing velocity as a result.
I have another question since you brought up high-end spec suites. So tenants are not getting deterred by the higher rental rates because of like maybe more high-end spec suites. They're actually like more opposed to going towards those.
In several markets, they'll even pay a premium for that space.
Yeah, the other thing you find with spec suites though, we found that you can probably afford to spend more because spec suites, I think over time they've evolved and will continue to evolve where it's more like an apartment. So when one tenant moves out, you're not going to touch that layout. When you move out of an apartment today, the apartment owner doesn't come in and rip out the kitchen and put a new kitchen in and move the bedroom around this thing. We do that in office buildings, and when you think about it, it's kind of crazy, okay? But we've done it, and that's the way the market is. But on these spec suites, it has, you have a 2,500 foot space, has 3 offices, a conference room, an open area, and a kitchen type area that's against the wall. Today, when tenants move out, we don't do anything in terms of moving walls and doors around. And I think over time, the market and other buyers, by the market I mean other investors, recognize that and give you credit for the fact that, we don't need to redo this suite. And we're probably not going to need to redo it for a long time, and we'll be able to go through multiple tenants with the same layout. I think spec suites are just now getting into kind of the 5-year. I think spec suites got really big between kind of like 16 and 17. And so now we're just seeing that first rollover, and at least that's what we're seeing in the deals we've done, that we've owned them long enough to see what happens when they turn over. We're not seeing a big renovation cost there. So I think there's some credit there. And the other thing is, when it comes to spec suites is I think you can get people to pay a premium, or people do pay a premium, because one thing that COVID did was it made permitting super long. Okay?
Right.
And so that made spec suites a lot more valuable, because all of a sudden somebody comes in and they want at least 2,500 feet. Do they want to wait, 30 days for the design, and now permitting is 60, 90 days in some places in the country, and then you got to build it out. And that takes, they're talking about 6 months versus taking something today. And so I think you're able to charge a premium for that.
Well, maybe wrapping up with our final question, we would love to hear your feedback on what are the best resources that your A&D partners can provide for you in regard to commercial real estate.
Look, as an investment manager, it's very rare that we are face-to-face, or what I like to say, belly-to-belly, with the tenants, okay? You guys are face-to-face with tenants more often than we are. So I think, to me, your input about here's what we're seeing tenants want today, here's why, here's what they're experiencing, et cetera, because you're going through and actually doing space plans, et cetera. And so, to me, that's invaluable, because hopefully I get that from a broker, but the broker is also sitting in a different part of the process, and sometimes the broker sees over, kind of on a macro level, what these tenants want in terms of, hey, they want to be in this part of town, or they want to, this or that, but they don't get, by the time the tenants getting into the minutia of a space plan, or thinking about the building or what their needs are, they're no longer involved. So to me, that's one thing, and where that translates into is what amenities, some negative things about your building. A&D can oftentimes tell you, hey, this is a huge problem with your building, whether it's ceiling height or glass line or whatever. Some of those things you can see, just if you've been in the business long enough, but sometimes you miss that stuff. So I think because you're closer to the customer than we are, I think that can be a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, and we love following up with our clients, after the finished product, and maybe 3 months later, 6 months later, just to really see, because a lot of times they move in and they're like, oh, it's great. Or there's issues moving in with furniture, or something else that they're like, oh, I wish we had done this way. But maybe after they've moved in and they've been there 3 months, they've got a different feedback for us, which is always really great to hear. And we love to incorporate that into our projects afterwards, so that we're taking feedback of people that have been there a while and making sure that we're doing some of those similar things for the next tenant.
I'd add to that too, two other ways that you all provide value. I'm thinking of a recent experience or a recent project where we worked together to create an outdoor amenity. You all see a lot higher volume of these projects than Dixon and I do, and that feedback loop that you mentioned is important. You have the reps that we don't have, and also real estate is still very localized. Design elements that work in Florida might not work here, and where Dixon and I traveled to several different markets and see several different concepts, that can be a pro in many regards. But you all have a very good understanding of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, what other groups are doing locally, what tenants like, what they expect, and so that helps as well.
Well, and we do really enjoy working with you both, and especially on Lake Vista, with the outdoor space and some of the other items that we have in that building. So we've truly enjoyed that, and we're so happy to have you guys here today, and so thankful for you and your time.
We just need to get some of the owners of those old office buildings to lower their prices, so then we can buy them and employ you guys exactly. to renovate them, okay?
There we go.
Exactly. We'll work on that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
Thank you guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for tuning in to Enterprise Design's Industry Insights video podcast. Please follow us and subscribe to our channel, or visit us on our website at enterprisedesign.com.
And look for our teaser video highlighting the next episode. We look forward to seeing you then.